Welcome back. Joining us from our Abuja studios is Professor Okey. Ikechukwu is the Professor of Strategic Management and Human Capital Development, writer, media professional, and Executive Director, Executive Specs Academy. Prof, thank you for coming on the program, Prof.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Prof, I know you can see all of the views as far as what is playing out. So there are two scenarios here, Prof. In Lagos, we saw what played out, and today the president has actually met with members of the Lagos State House of Assembly when a speaker emerged and was removed again after 50 days of Basa was reinstated, Speaker of Basa was reinstated. And there seems to be calm right now. It's all part of quote-unquote political godfatherism. Now in Rivers State, we have similar scenario when Wike played a critical role in the ascension of Governor Fubara as governor. We're seeing a different scenario. Even with the Supreme Court judgment, there is chaos still going on. I want you to give perspective as to what the impact of political godfatherism does to stability of the polity and your views.
Before that, let me make a passing comment on, say something to the people of Rivers State. In my place, they say that when two brothers are fighting over a piece of land, none of them will go to farm on that land, because if you go to farm on it, your brother will come and uproot the things you've put there. If he does, you will uproot it. So for as long as you're quarreling, that farm will yield nothing. But if an outsider goes to farm there, they say, okay, it's not my brother's son, they leave it. In other words, it's only outsiders that will be benefiting from the land that belongs to you because two of you have chosen not to resolve your issues. Rivers people must ask themselves, how much of what is going on will benefit the people of Rivers, those who either took part in elections or are fishermen or whatever you choose to call it, because of the disagreement between individuals? And also the Rivers elite, whether the assembly section or the executive section or the judge, whatever, they should begin to pay attention to the fact that their resources are flying out of their state, sorting out people and institutions who are on one side or the other, but not benefiting the state. That's the central thing I would like to say, and then urge them to wake up and resolve the issues. Nobody's interested in this, all this. We know that the quarrels are unreal. Unreal in the sense that the real issue over which there's confusion in Rivers State today is not about development. It's not about whether the governor's policies are good or bad. It's not about whether the infrastructure is on. It's not about whether Rivers people are doing well. It's about individuals saying to each other, you either reckon with me or will bring the roof down. Both those threatening and those being threatened must be aware that if the roof comes down, none of them will come out. And if any of them is coming out, it's coming out on crutches. So I'll leave that, and I think that says a lot about it. It's disgraceful, and they should do something to take it off the radar. It is Rivers State that's losing. Money is flying out of the state to parties, third parties, whom some think would help them, etc. I'll leave it at that and go back to the issue, substantive issue you raised, which is about godfatherism. And I'll start by saying that there is nothing fundamentally or essentially wrong with godfatherism. Sir Ahmadu Bello was a godfather, Awolowo was a godfather, Zeke was a godfather, Ekotiebo, many people from all over the country were godfathers. And the concept of godfather is discipleship. We have an ideology about development, about how to govern, about what is good for the people. We are now those running that ideology in the state. We want to breed other young men and women who will continue it after us. So godfatherism is ideological, was ideological, has always been ideological, is still ideological all over the world. Today, in place of the ideological godfatherism, you have what you might call a culture of nurturing burglars and putting them in public office to steal on your behalf after you've left, or to keep watch over what you've stolen, or to ensure that things keep flowing to you because they're the ones who put you. That's what is wrong. Not godfatherism in itself. Nobody will be speaking of Bola Ige today. Many people in the north, in the southeast, in the south-south, in the middle belt, if they didn't have political godfathers, that's when godfatherism was real. And to give context and etymological history to it, the whole concept of godfather has a religious root. If you are converted to Christianity, you are an adult. All those who became Christians were adults, who listened to Christ, became convinced, some were baptized. But then when it became a religion, you had churches, you are a Christian, you're giving birth to a child. Can your child who is ignorant, whose greatest skill is the ability to cry and feed, those are not skills with which he can say, I recognize the Lord and I'm a Christian. Therefore, initially, you became the godfather. You are the one allowing him to be baptized and saying on his behalf that I will train this child in Christian ways. But over these years, decades, the church discovered that, yes, parent as godfather or godmother was not very helpful because you're bringing up the child in prime Christian values, and then the child sees you quarreling with his mother, or the child sees you quarreling with the father, and so it became clear to the church that there was a disadvantage. So that's when the tradition changed, so that the godfather will be somebody from outside the family. That's why, going back for those who have that background, you recall that when we were kids, you hear that Edward was sent to his, was reported to his godfather, and the godfather came to the house, listened to the case, and flogged him thoroughly before the parents, took him along, and he spent the weekend with him and came back. So godfathering is about nurturing a better future generation based on some values that are sustainable. So it's nothing wrong in itself. Now, what we have is a bastardization. The use of the word godfatherism, but actually that's not what is going on, because loyalty is not to your godfather, but to a doctrine. If your godfather is a Marxist and he begins to introduce non-Marxist principles, he is no longer your ideological godfather in Marxism. Now, in the case of our environment, replacement of individuals by loyalists for reasons other than public good and ideology is what is happening. So when you put somebody and he's not playing ball, as they say, you get angry and you say, no, I'll get rid of him. He's not grateful. We know how these things work. Even those who ought to, as elder statesmen, to call two of you to order and say, listen, have a bit of shame. This state doesn't belong to you. And you that took over, find out how to navigate all of this. No, they're saying, yeah, somebody helped you to climb. How can you go there and lock the tap? First of all, he's not the owner of the water supply department. The water supply is meant for the people living in the building, and you're putting only his bucket to collect half of the water. Meanwhile, he's moved out of the building. So the discussion of godfatherism is the crisis, and it's not about River State, Edo. Every single state practically has had the same story of you didn't behave well or you're quarreling with your godfather, because the godfather, somebody gets in as governor, he tries to run the state, he discovers he can't. Anambra State, my own state, at a point had to keep the schools, all schools, closed for nearly 2 years because there was no money to pay teachers after godfathers had done violence to the state treasury. 2 years. Let's even assume it's just 1 year, and nobody walked about embarrassed. The godfathers were still triumphant. They were still collecting money from people in order for them to go for various offices. That is what I mean. That a state, children, the future of a nation was buried because some individuals helped somebody to rig an election and become governor. And to that extent, they described it as an investment which they must recover. So I must recover my investment. This is like what they call harvest season for us. So what are you talking about? That's the issue on the table. That is the disgrace of leadership in Nigeria today. That's the embarrassment nobody acknowledges. And that's where you find the failure of both tradition and religion. That religious leaders who ought to drive higher values remain silent where core issues of existential crisis appear. Only when you hear about appointment that one religion will say, no, you have not appointed our people. The disgrace also rests squarely on the head of the clergy all over the Federation.
All right, Prof, let me come in here. There's a lot to unpack, which is why we brought you to give a very broad intellectual perspective to what is playing out across board, not just the River State, but in this case, River State is the case on the table. And I want you to speak to rhetorics that we see and lobbying tact, if you will. Some have said that Governor Fubara needs to improve on his lobbying tact. In fact, Wike alluded to that effect that is playing to the gallery, and this is further escalating things. On the other hand, if you hear some of the rhetorics by Wike, the FCT minister himself, borderline, perhaps disparaging, cheeky, and even impugning. He said things like, he called the governor a boy this morning a couple of times, describing this River State High Court as the worst, PANDEF, perhaps worst organization, and some of these rhetorics that some people have considered inflammatory and even sensitive to ethnic sensibilities. How should leaders conduct themselves when the temperature is this high? Because what is going on, the rhetorics may not be helping the situation. How can you help here, Prof?
Well, rhetorics can only worsen the situation because rhetorics, when it's directed as mischief, name-calling, and self-justification, it can only inflame passions. The question now is, the statements of Wike, are they leading to greater understanding? The statements and actions of Fubara, are they leading to greater understanding? Are we sure both parties are being well advised? If Wike has called him a boy, he's not a boy. That's, for me, if you say today I'm a boy, look, Prof, you're a boy. You've just told a lie, and I don't need to have a headache because of that. So also, leaders must also develop a certain, you don't have to answer back on anything. But I go back to the original point. Fubara must ask himself, how much of what I'm doing will address the issue of peace, which I say I'm interested in, and serve the interests of Rivers people? Wike must also ask himself the same question. Should I focus more on showing who is the top dog, or on the fact that what I'm doing is also impacting the state in very fundamental ways? Because whether we like it or not, there is also the subsisting unconscious mentoring of a future generation. If I'm from Rivers State and I'm thinking of politics and I don't have very strong moral values, I'll be looking at these two men to see who is the tougher of them, to adopt those politics, to adopt the policies and approach and tactics without paying any attention to values of right and wrong. That is the full crisis on the table. Now, the issue needed is peace. Peace is not the same as silence. Peace is not the same as stupidity. There are clear legal, political, and to some extent, ethnic issues involved. From the legal angle, the judgment of the Supreme Court is on the table. The governor says he's doing something about that. From the political angle, there are people who are desperate to retain the advantages they have and probably deepen it and probably remove whoever is in their way, including Fubara. From the ethnic angle, there's a crisis of how will the judge take it if this matter goes the way it's going. What I think, looking at all the variables on the table, is that most of the people involved are not looking at the possibility of an implosion. Niger Delta is Niger Delta. The insurgents or militants or whatever you call them, they are still there. Yes, some of them are now doing fat contracts and therefore they are no longer making trouble. But there are others who can aspire to make trouble. In a volatile environment, you have what you call unpremeditated opportunistic criminality, where somebody decides, oh, it's because our brother is now governor that they are making trouble. Without consulting his brother, without consulting his sister or the association, he decides to go and bomb one location or one facility. And then it's escalation. Those who are locking up this assembly and speaking grammar from behind the gates, do they realize how vulnerable they are? Are they aware that in this country today, once you're driving an air-conditioned car, let's not say it's an SUV, you run the risk of being murdered on the road, assuming a riot breaks out. Because for you to look comfortable, the assumption you're the ones eating Nigeria's money. I use that colloquial expression. So this grandstanding is not taking anybody anywhere. They are living an illusion. There are no rich men in Nigeria, no matter how you choose to look at it. You've gone to the National Assembly, you've picked up a few, or State Assembly, you have a few 100 million, so 1 or 2 billion to your name. You're living in comfort with security, and then you begin to imagine you're safe. You begin to imagine that no matter what you say or what you do, nothing can happen to you. Are they paying attention to those who have held those positions in the last 15 years, even in the last 4 years? Former senators, former House of Rep members, former House of Assembly members, including former governors, most of whom have no forwarding address today, that this is a tenured engagement and that life is about continuity after that tenured engagement. So Rivers people should pull themselves together. If you're talking godfatherism in Rivers State, Wike should ask himself what brand, what image of godfatherism he's projecting. Fubara should also ask himself what image of what you might call, what image of a follower, a disciple am I projecting with my quarrel, on my quarrel with Wike. I have no interest in either of the parties being right or wrong, but the interest is in public good, national good. The reduction in the devastation of values that hold the people together. For now, those values are being pounded in a mortar.
Prof, there's another point. What appears to be, whether it is real or cosmetic logjam occasioned by this back and forth defective communication. Oh, you're supposed to do this. Oh, you rejected this. Going forward, I've asked the parties involved. Everybody keeps saying, this person should be this person should do that. But nobody seems to want to meet. Nobody has been able to meet the other person, either through phone call, at least what is available in the public, phone call, letter, or any means. It's all kinds of controversy just by, since the Supreme Court judgment, correspondence has been a problem for about a week. Correspondence. Prof, how do we get out of this logjam? Because the Rivers people are the ones at the lower end of all of this that are suffering.
The issue is this. Parties have taken extreme positions. Not only have they taken extreme positions, they are convinced that their positions are right and that they don't need to make any shift. This man is saying this guy must bow. The other one is saying this one must bow. We need to get rid of this person. You're not looking at the long-term effect. You're not looking at the full-blown consequences. The solution is simple. State your extreme position and then state your maximalist and minimalist position. My extreme position is that Governor Fubara should be removed. Some people are saying that. My minimalist position is that he should meet with us and give 1, 2, 3 concessions. Fubara says, my maximalist position is that this will not happen. Maybe the lawmakers will not come back. My minimalist position is that if they are coming back, it will be on those terms. Now, both parties meet. The first thing they do will be to throw away the maximalist position. No, how can you say the governor will go? He's thrown off the table. And you say, no, how can you say all this? You remove that. You now begin to negotiate the details of your minimalist position. Okay, I'll take point 1, but point 2 is difficult. This is what I think about point 2. The parties are hoping to come out 100% triumphant. That is folly. It will not happen. Because if any of the two parties wins comprehensively, there will be too much fire under the seat they want to sit. If you bury all the interests of Wike completely, there are hostile, dependent forces that will not sleep and will not allow you to sleep. If you bury all the interests of Fubara in this matter, including that of his supporters, you will have no state to govern. I believe the objective is to have a state to govern. I believe the reason why Wike handed over was that he was hoping a governor will continue to govern the state. He did fantastic infrastructure in Rivers State. Since he came to Abuja, you don't recognize some areas, places you didn't know there should be road. I don't know where he got his master plan for. If not for any, just the condition of Abuja today, nobody will see it and not say this man is doing something. But what is happening in Rivers does not do him any credit. So my take is simple. Both parties should not strive to win. Both parties should find accommodation for each other. They should find out what deals others can live with, provided it serves the interests of the state. They should also look at so many possibilities, like when the judgment of the Supreme Court came out, and Fubara said he was going to implement it, and he said that the local government caretaker committee chairman, I think, should hand over to those in charge, to the officers there. I looked at it. Is it possible for a governor to generate enough resources from Rivers State to govern the state? To an extent, there will be more than enough of that. You have the local government chairmen who were removed over 10 years ago, reinstated by the court, saying they are coming back. So there are too many things in this pot. If you're making a goosey soup, there are ingredients that make a goosey soup. If you're making a goosey soup and you have all the ingredients of the goosey soup, and you have the grenade, you have some knockout, you have some carbide, it's going to explode, and they shouldn't let that happen.
Perhaps, Prof, your point, we can just keep listening to your perspective. Very brilliant submissions you've made on as a political resolution beyond what after obeying what the court has said. Because as a people, if you ask the average Rivers person, they can just hazard a guess as to what is really the problem. Everybody just hazarding a guess. But we must thank you, Prof, for coming on the program. I appreciate your perspective on this very controversial issue. Professor Okey Ikechukwu, Professor of Strategic Management and Human Capital Development, writer, media professional, and Director, Executive Specs Academy. Prof, thank you. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you very much.